I've been a commercial diver for 23 years. I've worked oil rigs in the North Sea, salvage operations in the Mediterranean, underwater construction in the Gulf of Mexico. I've seen bodies, I've seen sharks, I've been trapped under ice and run out of air at 200 feet. I've experienced every nightmare scenario you can imagine when you're working in an environment that's actively trying to kill you. But nothing, and I mean nothing, prepared me for what we found aboard the MV Pacific Empress in March 2022. My name's Jack Reeves, and I'm telling this story because I need to get it out of my head. Maybe writing it down will help. Maybe it won't. But after 18 months of nightmares and 3 failed attempts to get back in the water, I figure I owe it to myself to try. The job started like most salvage operations, with a phone call from a desperate insurance company. The Pacific Empress was a mid-sized cargo vessel, about 600 feet long, that had gone down in the North Pacific, roughly 800 miles west of Seattle. She'd sent out a distress call on February 28, 2022, reporting catastrophic engine failure and taken on water. The Coast Guard launched a rescue operation, but by the time they arrived, the ship had already sunk. All 23 crew members were rescued by helicopter. That should have been the end of the story. Ships sink. It's tragic, it's expensive, but it happens. The insurance company writes off the loss, the owners file their claims, everyone moves on. But the Pacific Empress was different. She'd been carrying cargo worth north of $200 million, electronics, machinery, raw materials. More importantly, she'd sunk in relatively shallow water for the Pacific, only 3,000 feet. That's deep, but it's within the range of modern salvage technology. The insurance company wanted to know if recovery was feasible. That's where my company came in. Deep Water Salvage Solutions, based out of San Diego. We specialized in the kind of work most divers won't touch: technical deep diving, saturation diving, working in conditions that would make a normal person's brain scream and protest. I was brought on as lead diver for the operation. My partner was a guy named Marcus Webb, a former Navy diver who transitioned to commercial work after 20 years in the service. Marcus was solid, calm under pressure, technically brilliant, the kind of guy you wanted watching your back at depth. We mobilized in early March, sailing out of Seattle on the MV Artemis, a specialized salvage vessel equipped with ROVs, saturation diving systems, and all the equipment we'd need for a deep salvage operation. The crew was 16 people total. Divers, ROV operators, support staff, a marine archaeologist named Dr. Sarah Chen, who was there to document anything historically significant, and Captain Rita Morales, who'd been running salvage ops for 30 years. The Pacific Empress was lying at 2,847 feet, deep enough that we'd need to use saturation diving techniques. For those who don't know, saturation diving means living in a pressurized environment for days or weeks at a time, gradually saturating your body tissues with helium and oxygen. It allows you to work at extreme depths without spending hours decompressing after each dive. It's also one of the most dangerous jobs on the planet. Every year, saturation divers die in accidents that would make your blood run cold: explosive decompression, oxygen toxicity, equipment failures at depths where rescue is impossible. But the money was good, really good, and I'd done it dozens of times before. We reached the coordinates on March 9th. The weather was typical for the North Pacific in early spring: gray, cold, wind that cut through your gear like a knife. Captain Morales positioned the Artemis over the wreck site while we deployed our first ROV to get eyes on the target. The Pacific Empress appeared on our monitors like a ghost ship, sitting upright on the sea floor. The bow was angled slightly down, suggesting she'd plowed into the bottom at speed, but overall she was remarkably intact. No visible explosion damage, no signs of collision, just a ship that filled with water and sunk. "Looks pretty clean," Marcus observed, studying the footage. "Should be straightforward. Map the interior, identify cargo holds, determine what's salvageable." Dr. Chen was more interested in the circumstances. She said, "Engine failure shouldn't have sunk her this fast. These ships have redundant systems, watertight compartments. Something else happened." "That's not our concern," Captain Morales said. "We're here to assess salvage potential, not investigate the sinking. Jack, Marcus, you'll make the first dive tomorrow morning. I want a full exterior survey. Then we'll plan interior penetration with the full team." That night, I reviewed the ship's manifest while the ROV operators continued their reconnaissance. The Pacific Empress was carrying standard cargo, consumer electronics from China, automotive parts, steel ingots, some machinery. Nothing unusual, nothing that would explain the rapid sinking. But as I was scrolling through the documentation, I noticed something odd. The ship's total weight, including cargo, didn't quite match up with what the manifest listed. She was roughly 2,000 tons heavier than she should have been. I mentioned it to Dr. Chen. She frowned, did her own calculations, and confirmed the discrepancy. "Could be ballast," she suggested, "or maybe there was unlisted cargo." Unlisted cargo is code for smuggling. It's more common than you'd think. Ships carrying illegal goods, undeclared materials to avoid customs, sometimes even sanctioned cargo that's technically not allowed. The Pacific Empress was flagged out of Liberia, which meant regulation was flexible. "We'll know more once we get inside," I said. The next morning, Marcus and I entered the saturation chamber. We'd spend the next week living in a pressurized tube about 8 feet in diameter, slowly increasing the pressure to match the depth we'd be working at. It's claustrophobic, uncomfortable, and the helium atmosphere makes your voice sound like Mickey Mouse, but it's the only way to work at 3,000 feet. On March 11th, we made our first dive. The diving bell, a small pressurized capsule, was lowered from the Artemis down to the wreck. At 2,847 feet, the water pressure is about 1,300 psi, or roughly 90 times atmospheric. One mistake, one equipment failure, and you're dead before you can process what happened. The descent took 40 minutes. When we reached the wreck, we switched on our lights and exited the bell. The Pacific Empress loomed in front of us, massive and silent. At this depth, there's no natural light. Everything exists in the narrow beam of your helmet lamp, surrounded by absolute darkness. The ship's hull was covered in a thin layer of sediment, and small deep-sea creatures scattered as we approached. We spent the first dive doing exactly what Captain Morales had ordered, an exterior survey. We documented hull condition, photographed the superstructure, looked for obvious damage. Everything seemed normal. No gaping holes, no signs of collision or explosion, just a ship that filled with water and sunk. "Heading to the stern," I reported through the comm system. My voice was distorted by the helium, but the surface crew was used to it. Marcus and I swam along the port side, following the hull toward the rear of the ship. That's where we found the first anomaly. The stern loading doors, massive hydraulic hatches used for roll-on, roll-off cargo, were partially open. "That's weird," Marcus said. "Those doors should be sealed at sea." "Could have opened when she went down," I suggested. "Pressure differential, structural stress?" "Maybe." We maneuvered closer, shining our lights into the gap. The interior was dark, but I could make out what looked like cargo containers stacked in the hold. "We need to go inside," Marcus said. "Not yet," I replied. "We stick to the plan. Exterior survey first, then we plan interior penetration with the full team." We finished the dive and returned to the bell. Back on the surface, we reviewed our footage with Captain Morales and Dr. Chen. "Those stern doors shouldn't be open," Dr. Chen confirmed. "Even if pressure equalization caused them to shift, hydraulic systems are designed to fail closed, not open." "So someone opened them," Captain Morales said.
The crew, maybe, trying to get out? All crew were accounted for, I said. Everyone was rescued by helicopter before she went down. Then they opened them before abandoning ship, Marcus suggested. But why? No one had an answer. The next dive was scheduled for March 13th. This time, the plan was interior penetration. We'd enter through the stern doors and survey the cargo holds. ROVs had already been sent in to map the basic layout, but ROVs can't do everything. Sometimes you need human eyes and human judgment. Marcus and I descended again, exited the bell, and approached the stern doors. Up close, they looked even more wrong. The hydraulic rams that controlled them showed signs of manual override. Someone had deliberately opened these doors. We squeezed through the gap and entered the hold.
The interior of a sunken ship is one of the creepiest environments you can imagine. Everything is frozen in place, but also subtly wrong. Objects float or settle in unnatural positions. Corridors that were meant to be vertical are now horizontal, and there's always the awareness that you're inside a massive metal tomb. We swam through the stern hold, our lights cutting through the murk. The cargo containers were secured properly, stacked in organized rows. I checked the numbers on the containers against the manifest. Everything matched. Proceeding forward to hold 2, I reported. We passed through a bulkhead door into the next section. This hold was also full of containers, all apparently undisturbed. Whatever had sunk the Pacific Empress, it hadn't affected the cargo. Hold 3, Marcus said, pointing forward. We swam through another bulkhead door, and that's when things got strange. Hold 3 was different. Instead of organized stacks of containers, we found what looked like a hastily arranged collection of crates and boxes, all secured with cargo netting. The crates were wooden, unmarked, and definitely not standard shipping containers. "These aren't on the manifest," I said, swimming closer. Marcus pulled out a pry bar from his tool belt. "Let's see what we've got." "Careful," I warned. "Could be hazardous materials." He carefully wedged the pry bar under the lid of one crate and levered it open. Inside, packed in foam, were small metal cylinders about the size of soda cans. Each cylinder was labeled with what looked like Cyrillic text. "Can you read that?" Marcus asked. "No, but I'm photographing it." I documented the cylinders from multiple angles. "Surface, are you getting this footage?" "Affirmative," came the reply. "Dr. Chen is analyzing now." We opened 2 more crates. One contained what looked like electronic equipment, circuit boards, wiring, components I didn't recognize. The other held documents sealed in waterproof containers. "Jack, Marcus, this is Dr. Chen." Her voice crackled through the helium distortion. "The Cyrillic text on those cylinders. I'm running it through translation. Stand by." We waited, floating in the dark hold, our lights illuminating crates full of unknown cargo. "Jack," Dr. Chen's voice had changed, become urgent. "Those cylinders are marked as radioactive material, specifically cesium-137. It's a radioisotope used in medical equipment, but also in other applications." "How radioactive?" I asked, suddenly very aware of how close we were to the cylinders. "At that quantity, dangerous but not immediately lethal through your suit. But Jack, if this is what I think it is, you need to document everything and get out of there, now." Marcus and I exchanged glances. We spent the next 20 minutes methodically photographing every crate we could access, documenting positions, taking notes. The entire time, my radiation dosimeter was clicking softly, present but within acceptable limits. When we returned to the bell and started our ascent, Captain Morales was already on the comm. "We've got a problem," she said. "Dr. Chen has been researching the cargo you found, the cesium-137, the electronics, the configuration. She thinks the Pacific Empress was carrying components for radiological dispersal devices." "Dirty bombs," Marcus said quietly.
That's the working theory. We've contacted the Coast Guard and FBI. They're scrambling a response team, but it'll take them at least 24 hours to reach our position. Back in the saturation chamber, Marcus and I had plenty of time to think. If the Pacific Empress had been carrying dirty bomb components, who was transporting them? Where were they going? And most importantly, who knew they were there? The answer to that last question came faster than we expected. At 0237 hours on March 14th, the Artemis's radar picked up a vessel approaching at high speed. No identification, no radio contact, just a fast-moving blip coming straight for us. Captain Morales went to general quarters. Everyone not in saturation was roused from their bunks. I could hear the commotion through the chamber's intercom system, but couldn't do anything except wait. The approaching vessel came within a mile and stopped. Then we heard the sound of small boats launching, rigid inflatable boats by the sound of them, with powerful outboard motors. "This is the salvage vessel Artemis. You are approaching a commercial operation. Identify yourself immediately." No response. The ribs circled the Artemis twice, then one came alongside. Through the chamber's small porthole, I could see men in tactical gear boarding our vessel. They were armed, assault rifles, sidearms, the works. "What the fuck is happening?" Marcus asked. The intercom crackled. "Jack, Marcus, this is Sarah." Dr. Chen's voice was tight with stress. "Armed men have boarded. They're demanding all documentation of the wreck, all footage, all samples. They say they're private security hired by the Pacific Empress's owners." "That's bullshit," I said. "Private security doesn't board vessels in international waters." "I know, but they have guns and we don't. Jack, they're asking about the saturation divers. They want to know if anyone has entered the ship." My blood ran cold. "Don't tell them anything." "I have to. They're threatening the crew." The next hour was the longest of my life. Marcus and I were trapped in the saturation chamber, unable to help, unable even to see what was happening topside. We could only listen through the intercom as the armed men searched the Artemis, confiscated equipment, and interrogated the crew. Finally, the intercom crackled again. "Jack, they're leaving. They took all our documentation, all the footage from your dives, everything. They said if we report this to any authorities, they'll claim we were attempting to steal cargo, and they were acting in self-defense." "Did they hurt anyone?" I asked. "No. Captain Morales is furious, but everyone's okay." The armed men departed in their ribs, returning to their vessel, which immediately sped away to the west. We later learned they'd disabled our long-range communications equipment before leaving.
Well, Captain Morales made the decision to abort the operation. "We're going home," she announced. "This has gone way beyond a salvage job. Whatever was on that ship, someone wants it badly enough to commit piracy." But there was a problem. Marcus and I were still in saturation. Decompression would take 5 days. 5 days during which we'd be completely vulnerable if the armed men returned. "We'll run dark," Captain Morales said. "No lights, no radio, maintain absolute EM-con. We start decompression immediately and get as far from this location as possible." The Artemis began moving, putting distance between us and the wreck site, while Marcus and I began the slow decompression process. Every few hours, the pressure in our chamber decreased slightly, allowing the helium to slowly leave our body tissues. Go too fast, and the dissolved gas would form bubbles in our blood, the bends, which at this level of saturation would be fatal. We were 4 days into decompression when Dr. Chen visited the chamber. She had to speak through an intercom, but I could see her face through the viewport. "I've been thinking about what we found," she said. "The cesium-137, the electronics, the way it was all hidden in Hold 3. I think the Pacific Empress wasn't carrying dirty bomb components to deliver them somewhere. I think someone was smuggling them out of somewhere." "Out of where?" Marcus asked. "The ship's route. She departed from Vladivostok, Russia, heading to Vancouver. Vladivostok is near several former Soviet military installations. During the Cold War, the Soviet Union produced massive quantities of radioactive material for weapons programs. When the USSR collapsed, security at these facilities deteriorated. There's been a black market for radioisotopes for decades. So someone was smuggling radioactive material out of Russia," I said, "and the Pacific Empress was the transport." "But something went wrong," Dr. Chen continued. "The engines developed trouble, maybe sabotage, maybe just bad luck. She started sinking, the crew abandoned ship, and whoever was behind the smuggling operation couldn't risk the cargo being discovered. That's why those men came after us," Marcus said. "They wanted to make sure no one knew what was down there." "But now people do know," I said. "We took photos, we documented everything. Even though they confiscated our equipment, we remember what we saw." Dr. Chen nodded. "Which is why you need to be careful, very careful. When we get back to port, the FBI will want to debrief you, but there are other people who won't want you talking." She was right. We completed decompression on March 19th and returned to port in Seattle on March 21st. The FBI was waiting, so was Homeland Security, the Coast Guard, and about 6 other agencies whose acronyms I couldn't keep straight. We spent 3 days in debriefings, telling our story over and over, answering questions about what we'd seen. The agencies confirmed that the Pacific Empress had been under investigation for suspected smuggling, but they'd lost track of her before they could interdict. The ship's sinking had actually been a break for the investigation. Until we'd found the cargo, authorities had no proof of what was being transported. "You need to understand something," an FBI agent told me during one session. "The people behind this operation are extremely dangerous. They've killed before, and they'll kill again to protect their interests. Your testimony is valuable, but it also makes you a target." "So what am I supposed to do?" I asked. "Just wait for someone to come after me?" "We can offer protective custody for a period of time, but ultimately, you need to maintain a low profile. Don't talk about this operation, don't go public with what you saw, and most importantly, watch your back." That was 18 months ago. I haven't worked as a diver since. Every time I even think about getting in the water, I have panic attacks. The rational part of my brain knows I'm not in danger underwater. The threat, if it exists, is on land. But the irrational part, the part that spent a week trapped in a saturation chamber while armed men searched for us, that part won't let me go down. I don't know what happened to the cargo aboard the Pacific Empress. The FBI said they sent their own recovery team, but they wouldn't tell me what they found or whether anything was salvaged. For all I know, those crates are still sitting at 3,000 feet, slowly corroding, releasing their contents into the ocean. Marcus went back to diving. He's working an oil rig in the Gulf now, and he says he's fine, but I can hear the strain in his voice when we talk. Dr. Chen published a paper about the incident, heavily redacted, no specific details, arguing for better international cooperation in tracking nuclear materials. Captain Morales retired early. I spend a lot of time thinking about what we found down there, about how much illegal material is moving around the world right under our noses, hidden in shipping containers and cargo holds, protected by people willing to commit violence to keep their secrets. The Pacific Empress was just one ship, one operation. How many others are out there?
Sometimes I dream about the dive. I'm back in hold 3, surrounded by those wooden crates, my dosimeter clicking as I float in the darkness. And I wonder what would have happened if we'd opened the wrong crate, if we'd found something even more dangerous than cesium-137. The ocean covers 71% of Earth's surface, and we've explored less than 5% of it. That's a lot of space to hide things, a lot of room for secrets. I don't know if I'll ever dive again. The money was good, and I was damn good at my job. But every time I think about going back, I remember those armed men boarding the Artemis, and I remember the casual violence in their eyes, and I remember that some secrets are protected by people who have no hesitation about killing to keep them. The Pacific Empress is down there, the cargo is down there, and somewhere the people who put it there are still operating, still moving material, still willing to do whatever it takes to protect their interests. That's the reality of the world we live in. Most people never see it. They go about their lives unaware of what's happening in the dark places, the deep ocean, the hidden warehouses, the back channels of international trade. I saw it. I can't unsee it, and I'll carry it with me for the rest of my life. The ocean keeps its secrets, but sometimes those secrets find their way to the surface, whether we're ready for them or not.